Okay, hey, we are back here again with the Forensic Happy Hour. Again, the weeks keep on flying by, to be honest with you, but hey, it continues to pay the bills. This week, Patrick Eller, I think everyone is going to enjoy it simply because there's a very unique perspective on this on the forensic side, and I think it's very very important, and it will be. I know for a fact it's going to be a good episode. A lot of information, I'm sure, is going to be, as we say, you can learn through a fire hose. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Okay, and here we go, Patrick Eller. And as we always do at Forensic Happy Hour, we have to say cheers.
Cheers,
So,
buddy.
cheers, fantastic. Like I said, great to have you, and I do appreciate you taking the time. I know that you've been busy. I've been following obviously on Twitter a lot of the things that are going on for you and continue to go on. But before we kind of get started into the made up questions that I just do right off the top of my head, I want you to explain and talk to everyone really about kind of the forensic career, because it's been quite the career, and really where you started, and now what you're doing.
Yeah, so I started my forensic career in the Army. I spent the first 8 years of my military career as a military policeman. I joined Army Criminal Investigation Command after that. And during my first assignment with Army CID, I've always been a computer guy since I was young, but I found out that they had a computer forensics program when I was working on a task force. And I started playing with Incase. I think that was maybe version two, three. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But yeah, so it rolled from there into a program. The interesting thing about Army Criminal Investigations is, when I started doing that for the Army, we weren't structured. It was like the Wild Wild West. Like we had an examiner here, an examiner there. It was just kind of a little bit of everywhere. And around 2012 timeframe, they decided to change that, and they wanted to structure it and make it more streamlined. They were dealing with more media, and I got the good old call to say, "Hey, we want you to come to Army CID headquarters and help develop a program." And I said, "What does that mean?" They said, "You'll find out when you get here." And so from there, that's how I spent the last 7 years of my career, just running the Army CID program with Greg Norman, who actually retired last year. I know you know him.
Yeah.
We both retired around the same time, so we passed that torch off. But yeah, I mean, I'm very thankful for what the Army gave me during my time and allowed me to learn and do, and the experiences I got. And now I'm seeing it from a completely different perspective. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and so just to touch on kind of with the Army CID and with you and Greg, I mean, how I mean, personally, how do they take it? Obviously, we've all moved on from, some sort of, either law enforcement, and by we, you and I at this
Sure.
point, is, you know, is it, since you both left kind of the same time, did they already have people in place, or was it kind of a transition that you were able to go and either share knowledge, both of you guys to share the knowledge with the people that are coming in and that might be running the program, or just this program just stop?
No, so the programs continued to prosper. So we had built another position with my Greg and myself as an overlap position, which is Rich Saylor, who is still there. He's actually in my former position now. However, Dave Ortiz, I don't know if you know him,
Mm-hmm.
but he came in behind me for a short period, and he's now retiring. And we had a good plan in place. We had good continuity. And the thing about the Army is, that thing's a train. Once it's moving, it's moving. So we were the program management at the end of that. And the way you have to understand that is the field work being done at that point is still being done. So we built 10 labs around the globe strategically placed. And so the examiners are out there running those. We have a senior examiner in each one of those. And we just oversaw the program, acquisitions, policy, quality assurance, all the things that you would expect the upper level management to begin to do for a program that goes from 3 or 4 people to a global program of 80 to 100 examiners.
So how I mean how difficult is that to I guess to get everyone to be on the same sheet of music, right? I mean, obviously you're growing the program, but a lot of times programs grow too fast, right? Is that you might I guess water it down. So you might not be able to either the same type of tools or the training, or did you guys handle it differently so that pretty much everyone either trained together or the same tools? Tell me a little bit about that because that's I mean that's substantial growth in a short amount of time, and oftentimes whether it be on the corporate side or say in in the military or law enforcement, it's pretty difficult. So I guess how did it look?
So it was quite interesting because, as you know, in the Army, to develop anything takes plans, briefings, plans, funding, briefings, plans, positions, asking to realign positions. And so, I mean, it was a huge undertaking.
Mhm.
And it was a lot of arguing with the leadership above us. We need more funding. This is why. Digital forensics is now part of every case, down to the point where case agents are now trained at least to do logical extractions from mobile devices. That's not something that would have been thought about, when we first started doing that.
Mhm.
When we're deploying hundreds of cell phone extraction tools, not just 5 in a lab, hundreds. I mean, you have that capability across every single criminal investigation office, 60, 70 offices across the globe. I mean, it was a struggle, and
Yeah.
I'm sure it still is because of the funding issues. That those budgets continue to grow. We know development R&D on your side and on the side of the other programs
Yeah.
continues to become expensive because that R&D, when we're facing the vendors of the devices, all these things. So it was interesting because every time I'd go back to the boss and say, hey, I need X number more of
Right. Right.
seven, seven
Right.
figure amounts, they'd
Right.
look at me side eyed, say no. And I'd say,
Right.
well, then all of this stops.
Yeah.
If these licenses turn off, training stops. Who wants to answer that stuff to the Pentagon,
Right.
Congress, especially
Right.
in the height of sexual assault cases and other things that
Right.
were going on?
Yeah.
I will say I was very fortunate, though, in a shout out that he'll probably never hear, but by the name of General Quantock, who was the commanding general when we started building this program out. He has a computer science degree. He kind of got it,
Hmm.
and he
Yeah.
allowed us to build those first full years. So that was kind of like we built the locomotive and started moving it down the tracks.
Right.
And so the
Right.
predecessors beyond that said, well, we have to continue to do this because they were getting asked about it all the time. So it was just about showing the value, showing the worth, and then kind of
Yeah.
forcing it to occur.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I mean, that's actually an extremely important statement, and I think that a lot of companies, a lot of those that are, faced with, digital forensics, that they need to. Well, everyone is pretty much finding out that, but it used to be the day of okay, we need it now because it's an emergency, and I think that a lot of people now are seeing it as a necessity rather
Yes,
than if we need it type of thing. Is that digital forensics has become necessary in pretty much everything. It really doesn't matter where you are,
I agree.
whether it be Walmart or those corporate side, the Targets, the banks, the oil and gas, everywhere else. There's zeros and ones in everything, right? And so I think that the digital forensics side of it, I don't want to say everyone's getting it, because again, it is expensive, like you said. whether it be training or the tools or the training and the tools and more training. It is, and it's not something that you can do it once, right? I can do it once. Here's the training, fantastic. It's really having to learn every day, right?
Yeah,
Whether it be on the job or training. That's it again. But again, I think people are getting it, and it's still, not to. It's still to you still have conversations with people and go, what? You were going to spend your money on, buying a new fax machine, which, rather than, some other type of tool. So, I mean, I guess what are your thoughts on that? Has it gotten better, as in the reception to this, as in digital evidence is extremely important in a case? Are people still getting that, or are we still
yeah, no,
behind?
I think they are now. I think it's gotten to that point. And I think that they realize now too that when they don't look at the digital evidence aspects, and that's not even just the forensics. I mean the preservation of online media, all of those aspects. When they don't, and I quote Mike Tyson there, everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face, right? And so that's what has started to happen. The challenges have started to happen. Defense has gotten smarter. People are training lawyers. People are training judges. And so as case law continues to evolve around digital devices, it's a necessary evil. Our field is going to do nothing but continue to grow because the amount of devices that store data and connect to the internet are going to continue to grow.
So here's a question that's, again, I just boom, it hits me, and I just
Sure.
ask you questions. Is
Sure.
is that back in the day, and I'm gonna take it back to, I mean, a long time ago. I actually did fire investigations, and so you would wind up going and testify, and by that time, if you didn't have a certification or anything else as part of the fire investigations, determine the origin and cause of a fire, it became an issue. But then you would have them open up a book and ask you questions straight up. And I mean, now it evolved obviously into computer forensics. When I went into computer forensics, the same thing is, did you do this on these part of it? Our is it becoming that someone, if you're going to be testifying upon digital evidence, you better know your shit, right? I mean, you have to have things dialed in and
Agree.
understand really what's going on, not just going, yeah, you know what, I'm who I am, and this is it,
Well,
right?
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I've seen both sides of that, right? I've seen that from testifying for the prosecution. I've seen it for consulting and testifying for the defense. And I will tell you that if you're going to make statements about digital data, you should have some sort of knowledge, capability, and experience that you actually have conducted that if you're going to make a statement about it, because you're most likely going to get challenged, especially if it's any type of felony level case, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and I say that because attorneys are getting smarter, even without using a digital forensic
Come on,
consultant.
you're giving attorneys too much credit, right?
But they're being trained, right? I'm one of those people out there training attorneys.
Yeah,
I want them all to have that knowledge because let's look at this, right? What we
true.
do should be a transparent process. We call digital forensics a forensic science discipline, which requires transparency, not hiding behind an NDA, not hiding behind the cloak and dagger, not any of those things. If you're going to use a tool, introduce it into a criminal investigation, be ready to answer questions about what you did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's it.
I think that's really important. And that statement again is very important, that people need to understand that and not simply rely on, well, you know what, I used it, and I'll just make sure that the person who developed it, or the vendor comes in, right? No, I'm sorry, yeah, they're not going to testify necessarily to what you did, right? And nor are they going to say exactly how it works behind. But that's really doesn't matter, right? That
No,
has
that
everything to do with really, what did the investigator, what steps did they take? Did they follow the proper procedure? Those types of things.
right.
Yeah, 100% on that. And so now to kind of, not to fast forward, but to ask another question is as part of your investigations that you're currently doing, what are kind of the artifacts, or what are some of the things that you're requested to, to maintain or to recover or to look for? I mean, what are some of those things that typically, I mean, in general,
Yeah.
that those artifacts?
Social media, let's be real, it's the top of everything that we do these days. Did this chat happen? Did this post happen? Was this person in this location at this time? Interesting that you bring that up. I just had a case where I was testifying in a prelim hearing here in Virginia. I won't name the jurisdiction because the case is still kind of ongoing. But the point becomes is I'm testifying with something to do with Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm testifying about somebody posting something to their biography, the bio that you write about
Mm-hmm.
yourself, and I have a judge tell me, well, I don't know anything about social media or Instagram, but from what you're describing, I would say writing something on your bio is the same as you putting a sign in your picture window in front of your house and people driving by and seeing it. And I said, yes, except you have the ability to restrict who sees what's on your bio if you put those settings in place. And he goes, well, that makes no sense. If you're writing something about yourself on the internet, that means you expect that everybody can see it. And I said, that's not necessarily true, but I understand what you're saying.
Right. So that comes down to two. I mean, you talked about education of the attorneys and obviously the judge. Um, do you think the juries are as educated on social media, or more so, would you say, than those people who have been judges or attorneys for last 30 or 40 years?
Yeah, I really do, right? Talk about everyday use.
Yeah.
Um, find me more than a couple handful of people in a metropolitan area, at least, that's not walking around with a smartphone in their pocket,
Hmm.
who's using something, whether it's for business, whether it's for personal use. They're using some sort of media that they understand the concept of messaging, at least. They understand the difference between a direct message and a storyboard message or whatever it may be. But my problem becomes is when you are educated, and maybe this is a separate question or topic, but when you are educated on what you can do as an examiner, and then maybe you choose not to do it,
Mm-hmm.
that is
Mm-hmm.
where I have an issue, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, when it comes to this whole thing. Like, you know what's possible, you know what tools you have, and yet maybe you're like, well, we're just going to use this one and it's going to produce this and this is what we're going to turn over. And I only bring that up, Lee, to be honest, because I have a case that weighs pretty heavy on me.
Mm-hmm.
It worked out in our favor, so thank goodness. But a 17-year-old star athlete
Mm-hmm.
accused of sexual assault, right? And I was able, the attorney turns to me, says, "Hey, there was some stuff that happened on Snapchat, but he says he can't find it." Where the accuser, here's my new term for that: the complaining witness at that time, right? Until
Mm-hmm.
someone is actually proven to be otherwise,
Right.
stated that this happened this way, but yet supposedly told someone else on Snapchat that it was some other way. And they came to me, and I was able to recover, that information that showed that, hey, this didn't happen the way that it's being claimed it happened. And we turned that over to the Commonwealth attorney, and they dropped all charges. Never seen the inside of a courtroom. But think about it,
Mm-hmm.
17-year-old kid, star athlete. His
Right.
life is over if that thing lands in a courtroom,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. Is it could it possibly? I mean, and obviously, I have no idea, on the case, but I mean, I know just from experience that a lot of times people just become simply tool trained, as in, I do this, I press this, it comes out, and this is the only thing that exists within the device itself, right?
That's
So,
exactly
so
right.
and so again, someone that is just like, okay, I'm not going to look at that evidence, is I would put it more to the fact that, one, people rely simply on this is the phone, this is the stuff that came out. nothing else is there rather than obviously I'm hiding this type of stuff. I mean, would you agree with that? That one, I think that everyone should be held to a higher standard, as in being able to go in and look through everything that exists. Because whether you take one tool or another tool, I'm going to dump this. If it's just say, and I only know phones for now, and we'll talk about that. But if we bring, say, an iTunes backup is done. You can look through any tool. The data's all there, but certain tools, don't parse out some other data, and other tools parse out others' data and everything. But
Right.
the investigator, a lot of the investigators, simply just rely on what is decoded and parsed, and nothing else exists, right? So
That's exactly it.
and so I think that again, and I don't know. I've been doing this so many weeks, and it always the thing that circles around to me really comes down to one, not necessarily understanding the tool, right, but understanding the file systems. Understanding, being able to go in and look for that data should it be called upon. Say, hey, this investigation relies on this application, this third-party application.
Yes.
Well, no, this tool didn't support it, so it doesn't exist. No, being able to go in and dive into either a database or however, JSON files or whatever you're looking for to manually. I mean, would you agree with that? Is that, um,
That
people need to have more than just a simple, just a relying on this is what it gave me and this is what exists.
and you're hitting nail, right on the head, right? So you want to do that as an initial triage? I got it. Like triaging devices, absolutely needed, especially when you talk about mitigating circumstances. Right now needs to be some sort of data, but to rely on that to be the be all end all is the problem. But what happens is this goes back to that education piece, not just of the people examining the media, but the trier of fact, right? The judge, all of them, because when they don't consult somebody who has knowledge to understand those file structures, who understands how that data is stored, where parts of a file could be versus the entire file, because when the parser works against it, it's looking for the entire file, but it doesn't find the entire file, so it returns null, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so the problem becomes is they don't understand that, and they're just being presented with what is presented to them. And the term that I've come to use that a lot with is push button plea deals. There are a lot of push button plea deals occurring today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what can you tell investigators? I mean, what advice can you give to them? Whether on the prosecution side or the defense side. I mean, what can you give to them to you know to do better? I mean, that's what we all want to do as a community. We all want to do better, right? So what
Sure.
advice can you give to them? Because you see the good, you see the bad. What is that was like a facts of life thing, if you remember that a long time ago, right? But
That
I mean, what can you give to people? I mean, what's some advice for an investigator? What should they be doing?
learn. And I'm just saying, and I understand some classes are super expensive, right? I've been up and down that road on both sides of the house. When the government was paying for my training, it was great. Send me to this, send me to this, send me to this. When they're not, I'm like, oh, I really have to balance that a little bit, right? And now that I started hiring employees, that I'm responsible for that same exact thing we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And so I have a brand new examiner. And so this is a good way to segue into this, who I just brought on, who recently is a graduate from Champlain's digital forensics program, which I teach in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but would I put her on an exam and let her go in the courtroom right now? Absolutely not. Right. So I think it's about understanding. Don't talk about things that you don't personally have experience with, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there is so much right now. Think about the time we're in and what's going on, and everybody's turned virtual. There has been so much training offered. There's
Yeah.
been so many different vendors providing training on their tools. If you're not stopping and taking the time and effort to invest in yourself to do that and learn those things, that is where the problem becomes. Because if you just think, I've been doing this forever, I'm going to do this and it's going to work again.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's the problem that
Yeah.
occurs.
So on your current caseload, is your current caseload what type I mean type of digital media or what type of devices, computers, networks, mobile phones? I mean, what are you asked I guess to do? What's the percentages or the most prevalent type of device that you are
Oh,
dealing
mobile
with?
devices, hands down.
Yeah, yeah. So what would
I
you
mean,
say the percentage in that you're being requested to do exams versus say a laptop or a computer?
75, 80. I mean, it's high.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
and, and that's because everybody, like I said earlier, is walking around with a mobile device. They have it with them when they're accused of something.
Right.
And so that
Right.
tells things, right? And so, but think about how all that data is linking to each other now, too. So,
Mm-hmm.
phone linked to car
Right.
linked to phone. Both of those
Mm-hmm.
linked to cloud,
Right.
cloud linked to all accounts across those systems. And so it just spirals, but it starts with that mobile device.
So what do you? I guess what is your opinion on cloud sources, or cloud data, that information? I mean, how important is that to today's investigations?
Oh, it's unbelievably important. You know, when you think about that, um, almost everything we're doing, when you talk about social media and you talk about these things are stored on the device. Now, interestingly enough, when you talk about those cloud sources, though, you get into providers such as Snapchat and everyone who says it's designed to, when one person reads a message, the other person reads a message, our server wipes it. But
Mm-hmm.
does it really? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know that's what they say their architecture is. But
Mm-hmm.
yet, then when they get served with search warrants, magically data appears from time to
Right.
time,
Right.
right? And so we know that old saying that until you show me it's gone, I don't believe it's gone.
Right.
And,
Right.
and that's really that mentality you have to take when you're examining. Just to say that I read something that says this data doesn't exist, but one of those things is the answer is always no to every question you don't ask.
So here's a question that I have for you too: is that on obviously because you not being currently or with the law enforcement side of it, do you find it easier, or do you find because typically you have consent, especially if you're going to examine, say the person who hires you, their client. As in, do you find it easier to utilize cloud service data, as in username, password, whatever? You give it to me, I'm able to go in and pull this information down for them, rather than law enforcement, right? It's kind of the other. It's kind of because law enforcement is like, gray area, cloud stuff, can't do it. We're at versus if they're like, okay, I got to do a search warrant, I got to make sure I do this, do all this other stuff. Whereas if you're representing the client, you kind of have access to that and consent to be able to go in and grab that. I mean, does that sound about
And you're
right?
you're right. The only difference there is a lot of states, to include like Virginia,
Ah,
are those reciprocal discovery laws, right?
right,
And
right, 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 right.
so if I go do that and we're going to introduce this and I'm going to testify, I have to turn all that over as well. So
Exactly.
that is a back door for them to get it, right?
Ah, right.
Same
True.
thing applies. I'm not trying to hide it. I'm not trying to
Right,
hide what I'm doing. Here it
right.
is, right?
Yeah,
Prove that what I'm saying is not accurate.
yeah. So
And that's what it comes
to
down to.
yeah, to put on to that though, so if is it I mean, I'm super interested in this question right now. Is that is if we look at it on the law enforcement side of it, right? They're like, yeah, I'm not going to do the affidavit. I'm just, you know what? That's too much work to go and send it off to WhatsApp or to their email
Sure.
server or to try to get this stuff. That's too much work to do that. And so we're just going to wait and see if the attorney requests that and grabs that
Yeah.
data. I mean, is it like, okay, well, I'm not going to do it because I know that I'm going to have to show that data to them? I mean, explain to that because again, it's I don't
And
want to say
that's
it's an
a
investigation. It's kind of like, who's going to do what?
well, that's a straight consultation thing, right? When you think about it, you educate them up front
Right.
about, hey, You need to have an honest conversation with your client that if they feel there's something that's going to harm them, you need to make a decision as an attorney on which way to go with that, right?
Right.
And so I had that happen in a case. It's very interesting. So a guy was accused of a crime. I'm not going to say what crime, but he was accused of a crime, and law enforcement had reviewed his phone and found no evidence to place him at the scene of the crime.
Mm-hmm.
And so what occurs though is he claims, of course I wasn't there because I was home. So the attorney's like, well, damn, if we can prove you were home, this whole case is gone.
Right.
Attorney contacts me. We do consultation. I'm like, well, if that's what he's claiming and you believe him, we can do the service for you. If you hire us, we can extract the data and tell you what we find. I get the device, Lee, 15 minutes. Within 15 minutes, I place him at the scene of the crime.
Right. Right.
So I call the attorney because remember, there's attorney-client privilege. That's why I'm not using any details, right? But I
Right.
call the attorney and I'm like, yeah, this isn't good. He's like, what do you mean? You placed him at the house, right? I said, yeah, no. And he's like, what do you mean? So I was like, I placed him where you did not want him to be placed, right? He was there. What do you mean? I said, well, I looked in a location where they must not have looked, and I found this location data that placed his phone at the scene of the crime at the exact time that it was alleged. He's like,
Yeah.
thank you for your services. We'll be sending you the check for the amount that we agreed upon, and I'll call you on the next case. Have a good day. Because
Yeah.
it's the lawyer's job to then decide what to do with that. But he came back to me after the fact and thanked me for giving him that information because the client was so adamant that he wanted to take the stand and say these things.
Mm-hmm.
But he knew at that time he couldn't allow him to do that because he would perjure himself.
Right.
So he
Right.
couldn't allow his client to perjure himself. Now, what happened at the end of that case? I don't know. They don't,
Right.
they didn't come back to me
Right.
anymore on that case
Right. Right.
because, it would not benefit
Yes.
them. But
Exactly. And so on that, obviously you're like, yeah, okay. Uh-huh. But I mean, in the back of your mind, because I know as part because it's interesting is that obviously they hire you, find this, you're like, yeah, no. It's
uh,
not something that you have to say, okay, well, well, if it's not obviously national security or some other stuff or any whatever, however it's worded to be able to go in and to say, hey, law enforcement, this is it. But I mean, do you at the back of your mind just like, you know what? I hope that as part of the law enforcement that they're doing an examination that the same determination can be made. I
yeah,
mean,
but
what?
the problem was is they had already done their examination and did
Uh,
not find that, right? So what I
uh,
do with that data, Lily, so I don't end there because I do have, back here, it's there, right? So you got to remember
always
my
is.
other roles, though, right? So
Right.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
still teach law enforcement at the
Mhm.
military level,
Right.
and I still teach law enforcement as the primary digital forensics instructor to the National Forensics Academy at the
Right.
University of Tennessee, their 10-week
Mm-hmm.
course. And
Mm-hmm.
so I take all of those things and I put that in the training, right?
Ah. Yeah. Good.
So because
Good.
I feel that's my way to do that, right? My way
Right.
to
Right. Right.
pay that back forward is okay, it might have been missed in this case, but now here's what occurred in a case.
That's
Don't
great.
miss this
Yeah.
data. Pass
Right.
that along, right?
Right.
Because
Right. Right.
again, it's transparent. I
Right. Right.
can't do
Right.
anything
No,
about the
that's great.
person who misses it when I'm under obligation of privilege,
Right. Right. Right.
but I
Exactly.
can pass
Yeah.
that along in future classes so that hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. That's great. That's yeah. That's important. Yeah. I think that is obviously very very good. Because as we go and again hopefully as part of this when I started out doing this and whole Wild West everything kind of and as it builds up and as we go that those people that are everyone should and you should give it up, right? Give it up to everyone, and this is how because this is how you can do
Yeah.
better, right? And continue to build on to that. I think that's extremely important, especially the people that are coming out. And I've been pretty impressed, of actually the community itself has been pretty vocal on the training side of it, allowing people, here's what you got to do, here's all the things. There's so much people that are writing about different different artifacts, different, all the mobile stuff, or, the Discord server that we talked about,
Yeah,
with it last week, people getting onto some of those other items on there. So let's talk about, we talked about really with the social applications and those others that we have. But I mean, what artifacts, if we start talking about obviously with the social stuff of it, what do you think is, and we'll talk mobile devices because I know that you do a lot of
sure.
mobile devices. I mean, what's really, I guess I don't want to say damning, but I mean, because it's like the super awesome for the investigator. What is it that people should be, looking for, understanding? What type of files, what type of artifacts would you recommend?
Location data,
Yeah.
understanding um, how applications store data as well, right?
Yeah.
And so there's great shout outs for that. When you look at people like Alexis and what he's doing with iLeap and ALeap and the folks who are really giving back, he's teaching Python courses. Those are the things I'm talking about, getting into those databases. So
Mm-hmm.
learning and understanding the database will get you to the artifacts that you're looking for. Once you understand where the artifacts are stored, right? But so people say, well, here's a good example. I had a case recently, and I've already filed this with the vendor about the issue. But so timestamps. Let's talk about timestamps for a second as an artifact, right? Because those are
Right.
very important.
Yeah.
Um, but how is it that when you look at three live photos that were taken with an Apple device, does the creation time come up down to the second the same on three different files? Three
Mm-hmm.
different file names. The tool
Mm-hmm.
is reporting it the exact same down to the second.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you take only that tool's perspective and don't use the tool belt approach, as we were talking about, trust but
Yeah.
verify, right? You take that approach, you say, did someone manipulate the file names? I mean, you have a lot going through your head at that moment because
Right.
you're like,
Right.
how could it be three different file names, same exact creation time, down to the exact second?
Right.
But
Yeah.
then you think your training kicks in and you say, nah, I don't know if I believe what's being reported out by the tool. So let's go check these files in other tools. And then you find out when you check using two other tools, it says something completely different.
Yeah.
They were 2 seconds apart, 1 second apart. Now you're starting to get the explanation because
Mm-hmm.
live photos, 1.5 seconds before, 1.5 seconds after you press the button. That is what
Mm-hmm.
it's capturing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how could they
Yeah.
all be the same?
Yeah, I think I mean, that's a great point because, I mean, multiple tools is fantastic, but I take it another step of now we start talking about we have multiple tools, but should I understand how can I go in and look for that information, right? How can I go in and look for that data within it, whatever, however it's going to be stored, right? Being
Yes.
able to go in and parse that information out, and that's what's nice about a lot of the open source type of items, right? Is that one, it actually kind of explains it to you really of what's going on or where to look, and these are the different types of conversions, because I mean you can look in a lot of those and say this is how it's
Yeah.
converted, right? So I think that's extremely important. And again, my biggest thing, and I'm sure that is the whole backward approach of really investigation is like, okay, here I'm going to do the tool, and then I'm going to kind of learn what the hell it's doing, right?
Right.
Where it's completely wrong, right? Is kind of understanding this is the file structure, this is the file, this is how it's laid out, and this is what the
Sure.
tool's doing. That's the way you should do it, rather than just relying on it and doing the
Well,
backward
and let me
side of it,
back
right?
that up. Let me back that part up. The tool that gave me the wrong information was a paid tool.
Yeah.
The tools that gave me the right information were both free tools.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so in one of those, the third confirmatory that I used was again going back to the basics, right? So grabbing the actual file, throwing it in a hex viewer, reviewing the binary data and saying, oh, there's the stamp at the bottom of the file, and it doesn't match what the paid tool said. But it matches what I looked at in this other free EXIF viewer. So now I've looked in an
Right.
EXIF viewer. and I looked at the file structure itself, and these two match, but the paid tool doesn't,
Right.
I'm going to go with my matching data by using my knowledge to say, this is what's stamped in the actual file.
Love it. So you don't mean that I can just look at something and just believe it? I mean,
I
that
mean,
hurts that
if
hurts
you
my
do, I
feelings.
got some real estate contracts for you.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, very good. So tell me though, I mean, we'll kind of wrap this up. I don't want to I don't want to keep it too much longer, but
No, it'd be
you know,
great.
I know that obviously moving from kind of the law enforcement side of it to the private side of it, what are some of the hurdles that you have ran into?
Wow, let me tell you, that's such a great question. And I know that you probably know this too, right? But so
I wouldn't ask you if I
start,
didn't know the answer.
starting a company is hard. That's the first statement, right? And I always had this aspiration and told everyone for years and years and years I was going to do this. Like the domain name I owned for the last 10 years, I was in the military, all these things. I did all that ahead of time. Still hard. Finding clients, hard. Getting in the doors, hard. But the persistence pays off, right? If you believe in yourself and you believe what you're doing. And it's interesting that you bring that up because I'm very vocal about it, right? Like LinkedIn, I talk about what's going on in our company every week. I talk about those things because it helps other people understand it's possible, right?
Right.
And I've had two, now three actually, individuals reach out to me and say, "Hey, I just went out on my own. What do I do?"
Mhm.
Or I'm contemplating going out on my own, but I don't have all the money to buy all the tools. What was your approach? And I've now mentored three other people who have gone down this path
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic.
of saying, I want to do something for myself, to better myself, to challenge myself, and to work for myself. And I tell them up front, you're going to work long hours. It's hard. You're your best promoter. You're your sales department. You are your outreach department. You're your forensics department. You're your accounting department. You're all those things in the beginning, even if you put some money into it, because you need to know what's going on in all aspects of your business, or you will not necessarily succeed in trying to build something in this field. And they're doing okay. The people who have done that have come back to me, and they come back to me for guidance time and time again. Because here's the thing: everyone says, "But aren't they your competitor?" No, I don't see it that way, and a lot of people do. Right? Listen, there is so much digital forensic work available out there right now. And if you can help one client, you can help one person, and you can help the people who actually need help, by the way, too. Not just the ones who can afford it, but the ones who come and say, well, our budget doesn't really meet, but our son or our father or whoever it is accused of this crime. We're talking about federal public defenders. And I know you
Hmm.
had Troy on. All of these things, why are you really doing this? If it's only about money and not justice, not the truth, not helping those who can't help themselves, then I don't know what to say, right?
Yeah.
Because I take large cases, as I discussed with you pre-show, that I don't know if we should really get into. Um,
No, we shouldn't.
but right, exactly. Or very small cases of, you know, this little minor thing. And hey, was this vehicle at this part at this time? And so I just had one of those where a law enforcement car hit someone on a bicycle.
Hmm.
They tried to claim the guy didn't have a light on his bicycle, whatever it was, all these things. I got the terminal hard drive out of the car. The guy was on Firefox browser right at the exact time typing in a query when he hit the person.
Hmm.
So it was just the point, right? It's settled. It's a civil case, not a criminal case.
Hmm.
But just understanding it comes in all walks of life. And civil cases are that's a whole nother story. We need a whole nother
Yeah.
show about those.
Yeah, so I had Lee Whitfield was on obviously, and we were talking about really, you know, kind of DFIR for good type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I mean the representation is I think is pretty important, right? Because as you mentioned and as I agree, is that digital evidence is pretty much in every case, right? It has to
Yes.
do with that. There is some sort of whether it's you know the, you know I mean. Uh, the main piece of evidence, or it's corroboration or whatever that you have.
Sure.
So I mean, how important is that people have representation
Yep.
for that? And because a lot of people necessarily, I mean, they can't afford to have someone that's going to come in and say, yeah, I'm going to represent you on the digital side of it. I mean, how important is it to one, either educate at the local, the
Sure.
local public defenders, or those local, say, those attorneys that are doing pro bono work, or
Sure.
educating them and having a resource for them to understand this type of stuff. I mean, how important? Well, I
Well,
know it's extremely important. I guess. What are your feelings?
my feelings are it's very important, and that's why again, and I think a lot of the firms that do what I do this, but I don't charge for consultations, right? So I have attorneys call me all day long, all the time, and I give them direction. Probably sometimes more than I should, to the point where they're like, "Well, do we really need to hire you now?" No, go read this case law. This is what it says about this piece of data, right?
Right.
And because that is what we should be doing as part of giving back, right? Again, why should someone who can't afford digital forensics go to jail if they're innocent?
Right.
That is my point behind it. And the flip side of that is the same way. If someone can't afford or doesn't understand technology, they should be talking to someone who does. My
Right.
only problem with all of that, and I wasn't sure if we were going to get into this, and I guess maybe I won't dig too deep into it because I don't want to. I don't want to sling mud. But
Right.
equal access to training and tools is not equal access currently on the market,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know you understand what I'm saying there. I'm
Yeah.
sure you've seen
Yeah.
what I've said.
Yeah.
But and they say, okay, but those tools are restricted for a reason. Great.
Mm-hmm.
You want to restrict your tool? I guess you own it. You're the vendor. All these things. But if you think it's not going to get challenged in court by someone who's competent, you're wrong, right?
Right.
And that just recently happened in a case where a judge ordered, in a case that I'm working, to provide me access to a restricted tool.
Right.
So
Right.
that's going on its own. But the part about that is the training. Here's the thing. We talk about these discovery laws, right? So now you're going to say, we're not only restricting our tool, we're going to restrict all the training on our tool as
Right.
well to only government and law enforcement. But yet, when you receive that data in discovery, you will have no training on how to review that data from the vendor. And you can't even access training from the vendor. So
Right.
then someone says, well, you don't have any training on that tool. How can you say what we're saying is wrong?
Right.
Well, because I know a lot about digital forensics and file structures, and this file structure, and this file structure, and this file structure, they're all the same. Your tool, all it did was pull that data out. How to read that data, it's the same all the way across. If you break it down to that basic level, don't rely on parsed data or filtered data.
Mm-hmm.
Grab the actual data and read it and verify what you're talking about. You can say, well, you weren't trained by the vendor. That's great.
Right.
Do I need to be trained by the vendor to tell you that here it is in this picture? Here is this data that you're saying didn't exist, but it's right here, printed in black and white from that
Right.
data.
Right.
But
So
it's a
I mean,
problem.
that's yeah, no, I agree, and it's kind of been like that, right? It's been like that for a long time,
Yeah,
with certain vendors and certain training. I know that's for a fact.
that's why I'm not
Um,
saying that.
so so I mean, how can people, again, going back to, I mean, the mentoring thing that you had talked about is great. I mean, especially on a company level, people want to step out and they want to kind of get started and those other types of things. But, as well as, being able to get some information or some, hey, I'm going to call you up. I hate if it's going to blow up your phone or whatever, but
Oh,
don't give me
that's
your
okay.
phone number right now. But what I want to know is tell people, I mean, how can they get a hold of you? I mean, how can they go in and contact you, either on a consultation side of it, or
Yeah.
just to get some information on, maybe some more information, or help on some of their stuff.
Sure. So my email, I'll throw it out there. I don't care. It's Patrick at metadataforensics.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Follow that. There's always things going on there. I have projects going on with other companies right now.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, speaking of that, a future guest for you
Yeah,
should
I'm always
probably
looking for
be
those.
Andrew Garrett from Garrett Discovery.
Got
I,
it.
I know
Uh-huh.
you probably know him. He's been
Yep.
around a while.
Uh-huh.
Me and
Yep.
him have done a lot of work together and a lot of collaborations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the same way, we're out talking to people all the time, no
Mm-hmm.
matter who it is,
Right.
prosecutors, defense
Right.
attorneys, clients, all of those things. If you have a question, find me on LinkedIn. Look up my name. I'm there. Uh, Email me. Call me at the company phone number. I'm not going to give out my personal phone number,
Don't
but
do that ever.
but
Ever.
by the way, I can get texts on the company number.
Oh, even better.
So right, so 866-382-3282 or 86, believe this not, metadata. 86 metadata. It's
Wow.
funny how that worked
How
out.
long have you had that?
Yeah, a little
Perfect.
while.
I
Again, this
love
was
it.
all planned in motion a long time ago because
Yeah.
I had to put it out there and tell people I was going to do this because as you know, that's a path to saying I have to do it, right? It's
Yeah.
not I have this idea and I'm not going to follow through. I told so many people I was going to start this company and pursue this path that I felt like I was letting everyone down if I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Not just
Right. Right.
myself, but
Right.
everybody who I told. Like I got offered government jobs to go back to work for the government when I was leaving. Probably that pay me more than I've been able to pay myself since I started my company.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not as fulfilling. What
Right.
I'm doing now, because I get to make the decisions on who we help and how we approach it and how we teach the not just the digital data, but understanding what the whole digital atmosphere is, right?
Right.
The whole
Right.
landscape.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. No, it's
I'm
great.
way more fulfilled by that data.
That is. That is good. Hey, it's been almost an hour. Look at this.
I
This is the
know,
longest. This is the
right?
longest I've ever taken with a beer,
Yeah.
man. But I do appreciate it. It was fantastic. Again, very, very good. And yeah, we will definitely be in touch and make sure that we get everyone out to at least have a conversation. So cool, awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. I appreciate it.
No, okay. And I'm talking. It's actually, I feel sorry. I mean, almost like she's almost an hour of the conversation, but it was. Hey, I hope everyone lasted and kept going to the end because, I mean, there's some great information. And again, the whole DFIR type thing for good, making sure that those people continue to be or can be represented that maybe can't be represented because of, if they're not able to afford it. Because digital evidence, I mean, everyone should have obviously the fair shake and be able to see the truth through those zeros and ones because that honestly is the only thing that can't lie. The data is there, the data exists. And so, again, thank you, Pat. It was fantastic. Again, I love that word fantastic. I will continue to say it all the time. But again, next week, again, you have to wait till Tuesday till I say who the guest is, but it will be another great guest to help you guys down on the road with the trying to either get into the forensic side of it, instant response side of it, or hey, maybe learn something new. So again, thank you guys. Have a great weekend.